my name is Rony Ginosar, and I'm here to talk about creating intuitive specimens for variable fonts, and especially to talk about the research process that led us towards that. Last year we talked about the visual interactive specimen we created for variable fonts, allowing exploration and focus on interest areas. And today we will revisit this project, but from a different angle, the research angle. We will go through the main questions and approaches that we took in our research, talking about the process and the decisions taken, examining the translation from theory to practice to the tool making. So we will inspect how each insight from the research manifests in the final tool and how it was received by the designers in the user study that was conducted. Through all of this, I hope you can take something to your own research and process. The hardest thing is usually the start. You have all these ideas and questions and tabs open in your browser, and you need to make the first step. So let's talk at the beginning. What is it that we're asking? And then we can see where we're heading. We started by asking, how can we make variable fonts more intuitive for designers? But that doesn't mean much. So we tried to ask a more general question, and that can actually help us in finding where to begin. We asked, how can we make visual selection out of design spaces more intuitive for designers? So let's talk visual selection. We constantly select throughout the day, especially we visually select. What we eat, what we wear. When we arrive in an artistic task, visual selection is a key ingredient to our creation and to our personal style. Also, many times visual selection is the first thing we do in an artistic process. Let's say a sushi chef that selects their fish for the day. Traditionally, in design and in art, we visually select from a limited set of options, a catalog. For example, in type, as designers, when we select a font, we have a specimen, and we have tools to deal with the variety, like context and categories. The introduction of variable fonts gave graphic designers and type designers a powerful design tool. As a designer using the font, we can customize a font to our specific needs from within a scope defined by the type designer. The beauty in the concept of variable type is the ability to design and plan design space. It's a design that is based on simplifying a general idea. I can, as a designer of a variable font or as a designer of a space, I define a scope by defining the boundaries of an area, and then the user can play within that scope, extracting the instance that suits their needs. This allows for a user to go through a search process, going back and forth in a kind of an inner debate between the different options. Given that now the font is defined as a space, which is in fact endless, we need intuitive navigation tools for it. We would want to be able to explore the space and to reach the full range of options. In practice, we want to present endless options, while of course maintaining intuitive interaction and a smooth design experience without any overload. But that's generally a problem, mainly due to what is called visual overload. When we enter a supermarket, for example, we all know the feeling of having too many options. Say pasta. There are shapes and sizes and brands, and we either usually end up going with what we already know, or we choose a frozen pizza instead. As humans, when we have too many options, we usually refrain altogether from selecting, in what is called the paradox of choice. We daily interact with visual catalogs in our interaction with our computers, like in online shopping. Since selection is a daily act for us as users, as toolmakers, we should give a special emphasis to selection. Usually what we get to select a value from a range is sliders, like flight fares or hours. However, sliders, like the ones moving here and changing the font, sliders are a lot of options. Each slider affects the outcome differently. So when we play around with all the sliders and then we say, cool, and then we close the side and use one of our usual fonts, like we did with the pasta. All this brings us to the question, how do we want to select from a design space that has practically infinite amount of options, with more intuition and less blind search? Why even research an interface? History is full of examples of great technology that was cast aside due to bad interfaces. Take the great hit of the year, Zoom, which was introduced in 1964 as the picture phone booth of AT&T. It was a $500 million investment in R&D to make it a household appliance, cheap and affordable for every family, and we all know how well that went. Understanding the problems that visual selection can present, we went on to find answers, diving into visual selection research in psychology, economy, and cognitive sciences. Mapping our reviews so we could extract action items. For example, we looked through research of users at supermarkets and stores and how they pick the items, how the items are displayed, and what affects the user selection there. We'll go over the major takes when reviewing the tool in a few moments, but for example, zooming in on expert users, which are designers in our case, we learned that experts get more satisfaction from selection, and they approach the selection already with preferences. Thus, they can benefit from having a larger set to select from. But they also have more tools to process and handle the largest set. In the next step, we looked at current tools, both in digital catalogs and variable font interfaces, closely examining what is missing in our view and what we think they did good. We did the same thing for font and color mapping and interaction solutions. Only then, with all the research in hand, we started sketching interfaces, both static and interactive, and in each round, in each iteration, we discuss what works and what doesn't, using users at occasions along the way to hear external options as well. Now we can move on to see how all this theory was implemented in the actual tool. An interactive specimen that we developed, replacing abstract design decisions with a given set of visual options to select from and to react to. First up in the opening screen, we break down the decision into categories. Categories tremendously help to navigate multiple choice options. And in El Jargon, category labels help even more. Let's say heavy serif and light sans. Then, notice that there's no default option, meaning that the starting point needs to be selected. Selecting one of the options brings us to the main screen. Around the selected starting instance in the center appear 6 neighboring variations, reachable with different manipulations from the starting instance and from one another. Hovering over any instance reveals its neighboring instances, and zooming in adds the new neighbors to the display and shifts the display towards them, the interest area. Each time we hover, we present a subproblem to the bigger selection problem. The subproblem is smaller, more manageable in size, using a common definition of 5 to 7 items being small, manageable set of visual options. The sequential growing subproblems of side-by-side evaluation helps manage the decision-making as well. Visually presenting the options side by side allows us to less rely on internal reference and more on what is available at hand. Another help to navigation is what we gain from the font space that we used, a Hebrew implementation of the Nordei Cube that we created with Daniel Gomel for this project. Our options then include classical familiar typefaces at the extremities, which also helps with the comparison process. Clicking on an instance opens a fine-tuning window and affects the sample text and serial number before downloading the achieved instance as a regular TTF file for use. The user can control the amount of resolution with zooming, but also with a designated button that reveals all options. Sometimes you just want to see all the options straight up front, and as a designer, as an expert, you have the ability to deal with all the options. The user can decide to toggle the starting point, switching in the middle instance to the opposite option, affecting the rest of the instance display. Practical features. As the interface is tailored for expert users, it's equipped with tools that are needed for a full evaluation of a considered typeface. So we can type text in, and we can set the text size and the kerning and the leading on the example text. We can switch the display between black and white. We can change the display letter, theoretically typing in a word. So in total, this gives us an option to evaluate the font in 3 levels: letter, word, and text block. Finally, we note that novices and experts need different tools, but also have different display needs. As we chose expert users, we neglected a lot of the aspects that might be needed in a regular user setting. As a user study, we approached designers daily selecting fonts and asked them to select fonts for different tasks. Let's say a wedding invite. We asked them about the usability of our font, how easy or not it is to use, and explore using it. From the data we recorded, it seems that the categories we implemented in the opening screen greatly help with focusing the search. Half of the users selected a final font that was close to the initial instance. Most users were very happy with the idea, asking about incorporating the tool in their workflow, and obviously as designers they had many ideas on how to improve the interface and user experience. Tips and thoughts from the process. Try asking the same question from different angles. Even just using different wording sometimes help you understand where you want to go and how you should progress. Look at other fields. Maybe they answer a similar question in an interesting way, or maybe they have the same problem, and that can open your eyes to new ideas. Sometimes the most obvious thing needs to be done. When creating a user interface, you should ask users what they think also along the way, and not just at the end. I wanted to review the research process of this project so that everybody can benefit towards building better tools for our community. We can probably talk for days about user interfaces and variable type, but for today I hope you've enjoyed and benefited from the peek into the journey we took towards creating your own creations. So thank you.